Hello and welcome to What Moves Us, the podcast where we ask what moves us, or more accurately, what's going to move us in future.
With the Rail Innovation Group's Johanna Randall and Liam Henderson, we look at debates, themes and decisions of the minute that will impact on the way we get about in the future.
Morning, Johanna. How are you today?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm excited about our guest that we're having on in a minute to talk about should transport be free.
Why are you excited?
Because I think it's a timely time to have it. People are saying it. I get on the train. There's not very many people on the train, but tickets being checked. Yes. I don't know. It's good time to have the debate. And I think
it's interesting. I shouldn't really be saying this, but I know some middle class people that are actually travelling without paying because nobody's checking the tickets.
Well, they are on the Southwestern Railway. I know that. Otherwise, we're subsidising them. Us paying people, I guess. So it's wrapped up with our ticketing workstream. How's that going?
It is, yes. We've had our round table and we've had some interesting thoughts on ticketing, where it should be going, what we should be doing in terms of the back office. Obviously the debate about whether transport should be free, but I think everybody is of the thought that today's ticketing is not fit for purpose, as blatant as that, and we need to be moving to more of an integrated smart ticketing system that more meets the needs of current travellers, or even future travellers, should say, given where we are, rather than a moment in time in the 1990s, which is what our system is designed to meet.
Let's introduce our guests for today, shall we? We have joining us Gareth Hawkins, Commercial Director of Transportation at Revenue Analytics, and we have Hayden Sutherland, founder of the Open Transport Initiative. Also joining us, Hayden's in Glasgow and Gareth's in Nottingham. Look at them there, ready to do battle. So we asked these two because we had our workshop last week where there were slightly differing views. So we thought we'd get them together in an intense place under pressure on a podcast, because then we'd get them to say far more about their reasons for proposing or not proposing free transport. So I guess Gareth and Hayden, do you want to just do a quick, more detailed intro if you want?
Sure. So yes, thank you. So I'm the Commercial Director for Transportation at Revenue Analytics. So we created a revenue management system specifically for the rail industry, leaning on our expertise in revenue management for airlines, hospitality and media. So we're looking to take advantage of some of the big changes that have happened in rail in the form of RAS2 to turn from leg level pricing to journey level pricing. And looking forward to having a debate on whether we should offer free travel for the rail industry.
Sensing no, considering you have a solution for paying for charging.
Yeah, I would like to keep my job for the next few months. So hopefully listeners aren't swayed too much by Hayden's view.
Hayden?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Liam. Thank you, Gareth, and thank you, Johanna, for letting me loose on your podcast yet again. I'm founder of an initiative called the Open Transport Initiative, which is all around using open standards and open data sharing APIs to create the open banking for transport. In other words, interoperability and data sharing amongst transport and mobility accounts. So it's trying to move data and account sharing of customers into the 21st century.
Now, if I could start with Hayden, what you described is you talked about a way of charging for transport interoperably. So why on earth would you be proposing not to charge people?
It was born out. The reason why we talked about it and the reason why we brought it up here is I was being slightly cantankerous and slightly challenging in order to mobilize debate. So if any of my fee-paying clients are listening to your podcast right now, I am deliberately taking a view, of course, just a perspective to facilitate debate and get this going. But there has been a move in the transport industry in different parts across Europe, in different countries and different places, to carry out tests, as we say, sort of carry out a move to facilitating more and more free transport. So what I think we should do is, I mean, my suggestion is we should consider transport as a basic utility, the same way that you have universal basic income. I think we should have universal basic mobility. And therefore, if we provide for people, universal basic income, why can't we do the same for transport? And why shouldn't, therefore, transport be free to those that need it?
It is, if you use your legs.
Yes.
So expand on that idea. What do you mean by universal basic mobility? Because I think in terms of what some of the places that, because I don't think free transport is a new concept. I mean, quite a lot of European companies have been, countries have been playing around with this for 15, 20 years. Small places in Belgium where transport pricing became unviable because otherwise they were going to lose their public transport. Obviously, Estonia have been trying it in Tallinn, and they Luxembourg have been trying it, and I think also places in China are quite interested in it. Some of the bigger cities, Chengdu, because they've got big congestion problems. So what do you mean by universal basic mobility?
So so there is two views. One of the view is you make absolutely all public transport free. And that is a huge step, and one could argue that by doing that, it makes public transport, and I would say public transport that is moving towards a net zero aim free, pulling people out of cars, pulling people out of carbon emitting vehicles, make them free. If you're so pulling that, then that's the first step. Then the interim step is to provide more and more services for free for those who are on lower incomes, who need to travel. So if we take the very basics, we currently provide free transport, or a lot of free transport, to some people, like people in the emergency services. We provide some basic transport free, and if you actually, I think we actually provide over, I think it's somewhere around sort of a quarter of all transport is either free or subsidized in some way. A significant amount of transport is free. So why don't we move even further and say, as a basic right, if you need to travel for your work, why shouldn't and you don't have the ability to pay, or it would encourage and move and adapt people, change people's behavior, why shouldn't we make it available to people? Make it a free utility for those that need it. So there's a two steps. There's one is absolutely free, and the other one is free for students, free for over 50s, free for free to school children, free to those who are I'm sure that the less contentious this is, say, let's give NHS workers free transport on public transport. That's and I think if I say that, everybody goes, yeah, okay, we would do that, especially given 2020. But then, what about school teachers? What about care home workers? What about those people who are lower income public sector people who have to get up and work shifts and craft for us? Them, why aren't they given free transport as well? So I'm throwing all these out there, perhaps throwing different ideas out, but
yeah, and I think there's kind of two core ideas then. I think one of them is quite linked to the reason why you mentioned it when we're exploring this piece on what the future of ticketing should be, and that's this concept of, well, at the moment, because of the pandemic, lots of people are getting back into their cars and they don't trust to use public transport. So nobody's using public transport. So if nobody's using it and we have the costs at the moment, why don't we make it free? Because then people might start using it again. I mean, what was your theory behind making that argument?
Well, you're right. I mean, right now we are, well, you know, the rail services and public transport services are back to, you know, full or near full, you know, a service operational. They're operationally back to, you know, very close to 100%. And yet we're running these trains up and down, up and down, up and down, and they're as empty as can be. You know, people have got a carriage to themselves. And at the same time, I know in certain parts of the UK, car transport has gone up. Individual use, single occupant, petrol, diesel driven vehicles has gone up. Which, I mean, because everybody's got their own little bubbles going around. Now, countless people have in the industry said the trains and the buses are well ventilated, they're sanitized, they are, they're there to be used, and we're paying it as infrastructure. If you want, first of all, so for this pandemic and to get out of this pandemic, why don't you make transport free? Because it's being used anyway. You know, people say, well, let's drop it down to £1 to use, 50 pence to use. I'm saying remove all barriers to its use, encourage public transport now for the pandemic, make it free. We've got the cost anyway. We're running trains up and down. They are clean. They are aired and ventilated. They are, they're not proven to be significant vectors of the pandemic. Let's encourage people out of those gas guzzling, mileage busting, four-wheel drive SUVs, and put them on the rail, put them on the buses where there's far more effective use of transport.
I think given the announcement yesterday by the government on green transport and wanting to remove diesel and petrol cars, sooner than was originally planned by 2030 rather than 2040, this could be a good carrot to offer. But I think now is also a good time to bring Gareth in and ask him to make the case against why you wouldn't do this and why maybe revenue management tools might be more suitable to encouraging people back onto rail.
Yeah, it's slightly different message to the last session we had, a little bit of a moonwalk from Hayden. But I think, you're right. The intention behind both of our messages is to just get people back on the rail network. In short term, I can't really argue with Hayden's point. The trains are running up and down the country and they're empty. So I think the challenge is no one actually knows if they're really that safe when you get masses of people going on the trains. You get the government's intention who are telling us not to travel, maybe rightly so. So I think in the short term, offering a incentive to get people back on the train is a good idea. I think offering it free in the long term is not a good idea. Offering it to segments of people in the country can be challenging because you always get other segments who want to be included in that, and they'll argue as to why they're not being included in having free travel. And one of the biggest challenges that we see in the rail industry sort of pre-COVID is actually managing capacity. So if you give everyone for free, I'm not sure how they're going to actually manage how many people are going to be going onto the trains, as we struggle with that anyway at the moment. Long term, if we look at the long term, because 2021 is going to be a saviour and 2020 is going to disappear, revenue management is a great tool to actually put in place because you can start to drive demand when demand is at low levels, and you can start to. The example that I always like is that when you go to the barbers, everyone really wants to go on a Saturday, and it's absolutely packed, and then everyone's like, "Oh, I can't get in." So what the barbers did, they actually increased the prices on a Saturday. So only a segment of people who are willing to pay that will go on a Saturday, and then they reduce the price on other days when people can actually go in, and that's exactly what they should do for the rail industry, and they continue to do. But with the introduction of new technology, I think revenue management will be put in place, and you can start to see the demand coming back into the rail industry, including incentivizing travel for days where demand will be low.
Okay. So, I mean, we've got, I mean, as I say, there's an interim pandemic, post-pandemic, short-term, and not just nudging, hugely encouraging people to travel. I say, open up the gates, make it free, and get them to encourage and get people to change their behaviour back from, to using, quite right, Liam, running, walking, cycling, skateboarding, or micro-mobility, whatever it is, as well as using public transport again to encourage to into that, and everybody thinks that is a great idea. And why wouldn't you just make it free if it's being used? Because there's so little revenue coming through the system right now. But then, okay, let's just take, if I may, then take the next theoretical step to a post-pandemic, hopefully a post-vaccinated, where everybody's immune response is now we're okay and we're all able to travel. The question is then, and Gareth is saying we shouldn't make it free. If I'm going to take the complete polar opposite opinion and say we should still use it, and price is because what I'm saying is we use cost or price of travel, the ticket price, as the way to manage the demand on the network. Now, is price the only factor we have to change people's behaviors on the network? And is that a case? Could we say it's quite a blunt instrument? What other factors are there to manipulate and change and nudge people's behaviors rather than price?
I think it's quite an interesting point. And if you think about what we're actually doing right now, we're not meeting in person. We're on a Zoom call. Yeah. That is going to be the biggest challenge of us getting out of our comfort zones of being at home and using technology. I had an interesting conversation with someone who, a small world, the railway, someone I worked on a bid with a long time ago. And they put in as their bid that the biggest challenge for rail is technology in 1996. I mean, maybe they're the oracle, and they see things in the future better than us. But it's interesting that technology now, Zoom's improving all the time. The quality of it is improving. Teams is improving. And that's the biggest challenge I see is the rail industry. So offering it free might be an incentive to get people back and maybe start to sort of enjoy being part of, seeing people face to face, which I'm desperately looking forward to. But how do you reverse free? How do you start getting people giving something for free and then say, oh, it's the end of the pandemic, we can't afford to give you free anymore, we need to start charging you? And I think that's an odd mindset for people to accept.
Yeah, but I mean, the price isn't the only lever to use. I mean, with modern technology, if you've got, there are some other means. I mean, let's take the real cantankerous view, the settlement and financial apportionment systems at the back end. One might even say running marketing and commercial teams. Heaven forbid I'm going to get slaughtered for this from clients. Running marketing and commercial teams, running settlement engines, running all these, charging, payment service providers taking 3, 4, 5, 6% of the transaction, affiliates taking a chunk, all the other systems that are used to control a very, very limited lever of demand is perhaps too much. And if we got rid of all that, what's the net reduction in the overall cost of managing of an organization, of the railways? Take that cost out and then use it to manage demand in some way else. Yes, sure. Perhaps use technology. Perhaps use it for demand management. Perhaps, you have to book the train. If you haven't booked it, you can't do it. Or try find some other lever otherwise, we're going to be back to the fact that low-cost airlines are going to be able to, it's going to cost you more for your coffee to queue up for your coffee in the queue for the low-cost airline than it does to fly from London to Glasgow, where it's 200 quid to go on the train. And quite frankly, that's bonkers.
But you see that, I think that's an interesting point that you bring in there, Hayden. Yeah, about the commercial teams and the cost, because if it does become a utility, where does the incentive come to improve the passenger experience? Or is it literally just a utility and you're getting a seat or a space on a train and there's no experience to it? It's just a way of getting A to B.
Oh, I'm sorry, I wasn't perhaps saying you make it the cheapest thing possible and you make it just a wooden bench on a carriage. I'm saying that you can still have, in fact, you could perhaps say that rather than focusing on the commercialness of a public transport organisation, you could focus on the experience. And
I would argue, sorry, my point with that would be that incentive would disappear if people weren't paying, because their expectations would go down, and the public sector that was paying for it would say, "You be happy, you've got a train. Sit down, be quiet. You'd be happy, you've got a train for free." There's no incentive there to improve the experience because someone pays for it.
Are you saying that because somebody pays £1 on a rail card offer, or a person who gets free transport, I don't know, a public sector worker or whatever, or a person who's going for a job interview and therefore they've got that transport for free, doesn't value that transport any more than doesn't value the usefulness? I think I
don't know whether it's valuing the usefulness, but I guess I'm going to be maybe a bit controversial by doing an analogy now, because it's a bit like the National Health Service, in the sense that we pay for it through our taxes, and it's very clear that we pay for our taxes. So if we don't get a very good service, we forgive them. Yeah, if they fail us, if we don't, if we can't get our doctor's appointment, if we can't, if we fail treatment or whatever, we still worship the health service, even though we don't necessarily get the full value that we should get from it. And I think, this year being a case in point where, where they've had to put all their resources into the pandemic, and it's meant that lots of other services, people waiting for surgery and that, have had to wait long in the queue and that. So it's, do you get that same sort of so do you get lack of investment? Because the one thing that we have had quite well in public transport, or rail, not buses but rail, there's been huge amounts of investment within rail over the last 20 years. Would we start to go into a position between sort of, let's say, beaching and privatization, where that investment, because Treasury would be under pressure, would reduce the investment, and it would become more of that basic service? So you wouldn't get new rolling stock, you wouldn't get improved, and how would you fight against that? How would that, in terms of a traded good, how would that work against the airlines, as you've just mentioned, and also personal car use?
I think you raised a good point around the national health system. You do, as you say, it's free, but you do pay for it, right? So you see it through your taxes. There's no such thing as free, is there, really, in reality? So even if we give passengers free journeys, you're probably going to be paying for it through your tax in the long term. But I wonder if that is an option, that you say, well, do you actually pay more on your taxes and have another area that says this is your transportation tax and that all travel is free?
Well, I mean, that's really what happened with Tallinn. That you have to pay a $1,000 equivalent, whatever it is, to live in this city, and that includes your free transport. The mayor of Tallinn said, I think it was beginning of this year, that when they made things free a decade or so ago, their overall budget for transport only dropped 20%. Their overall income, or their overall sort of revenue, only dropped 20%. So we're talking about taking the fare system out, but still providing a great experience.
But should we instead focus then on urban areas versus long distance rail? Because I think you would have quite a lot of people saying, I shouldn't subsidise your trip to the seaside.
That's a very good point. And one would say that if you're going to take some form of ground, then if you live in the city, why shouldn't you have free urban transport? But if you want to travel intercity or from one geographic area significant to another, why shouldn't you pay? So you're right. If you want to use it for social and tourism basis, the other thing is just why don't we flip it and say, well, you're right. Only those who are residents and got a residence card can travel. Tourists, business travelers from outside, anybody who's not a resident of the city gets to use it. So one would say it becomes a tourist tax or an extra foreigner tax.
But that's what they've done in Tallinn, though, isn't it? That it's only residents that get free travel.
Indeed.
If you're a tourist into Tallinn, you still have to pay your tram fare and that.
Yeah, I'm not too sure with Luxembourg, because Luxembourg at the beginning of this year has made all public transport free, but I am unsure of whether it's only for locals, people who are in that country, or whether everybody gets it. It'd be interesting to see if that's the same measure as well.
Yeah, because Luxembourg's quite complicated as well, isn't it? Because there's something like 80% of people who work in Luxembourg live somewhere else because it's so expensive.
Yeah, but it's one of the most expensive, but it's also one of the most affluent countries in Europe. Perhaps that making a state of the fact that it's not possible to do it in the United Kingdom because we're no longer the most affluent countries in Europe.
Can we just go back to the point that you raised earlier that you just said it's quite expensive to pay £200 for a ticket from, London to Scotland. What should the rail industry do if the demand is there and people are willing to pay that fee and the trains are full?
Well, I think I don't think we pay fairly for the things we consume. If you're running on why don't we pay more for a diesel train that pollutes more and kicks out more than if you're traveling on that, than if you're traveling on electrified, that's not contributing to the pollution of this planet and not taking us to a net zero? Why, when airlines are proven and the statistics are out there that their air travel after car travel, I think, although the air travel and car travel pollute the most for CO2, why aren't we paying for why don't people pay the most for those things that pollute more? In other words, why isn't airlines so significantly more taxed to make the rail seem more cheap?
Well, it sounds like that you should have a movement fee, and the movement fee is based on carbon output.
I would completely back that.
So your car.
There's an interesting concept. So everything's free, but you have to pay to move.
You pay to move depending on your pollutants.
But then you have the unfair situation of commuters in the southeast of England would have a very low fare because it's all electric, and commuters in the north of England would pay a lot because they're all diesel. But that's nothing to do with their own choices. It's because the investment's not being put in for electric.
But then maybe the government should also be fined for not investing.
Gareth, to answer your question about my concern is not so much the revenue coming in. It's we are not taxing, or we are not making those industries that pay the most, that pollute the most, pay the most to reverse that. And if the rail, transport is between you have is between 20 to 30% of the CO2 output of a country in the Western world. Let's say 25% of all carbon emission comes from transport, and it's one of the single largest pollutants after major industry and other things like that. So we have a role to play in reducing that and taking it, maybe not just for us, maybe for the generations that come after us, and preserving this planet. So if we do that, why shouldn't we say, I don't know, you're free to travel on the transport network, but if it is a net zero form of transport, I think, you look at it like that, we would nudge people out. There would be an incentive to people to say, oh, I'm not going on the diesel train. I want to go on the electric train, and that's for free. It might take slightly slower or might have to go circuitous route, but I think habits would change significantly.
Yeah, it's taken a slightly different turn to sort of damaging the world through carbon footprint. But yeah, I think the idea of adding any sort of carbon tax is a great idea, right, in the future. But I'm not sure how to respond to that, to be honest. I still can't see how free travel is going to work. I like the idea of it, but competition is always going to be a challenge. People will always want to fly. People always want to get in the car. And revenue management is just a way of actually just managing that to get people back onto the rail. By looking at the way in which airlines are charging for people to do the same sort of routes, cars to do the same sort of routes. But yeah, with regards to in a response to the carbon footprint, it's and revenue management, not too sure if the two go hand in hand, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, let's just say that, Belgium had I think for 15 years, I'm trying to remember, 15, 16 years, it had run an experiment for free transport, and it went back to charging for it.
But the case studies you're mentioning are Luxembourg, Belgium, and Tallinn, which are all Munchkin-sized places. They're not big, long-distance transport hubs. So on a city base, I think we've established that, yes, you could probably think about that and try that. But for long-distance journeys where you are competing with flights, or you're going on holiday domestically or anything else, or you're doing business travel between cities, that's an entirely different context.
It is. I actually will stipulate a change in emotion that Gareth's revenue management software shouldn't just include rail, it should include airlines and other modes of transport as well, and be a proper multimodal revenue management system and properly give the proper fares, and which should all be accountable to encourage us towards a more net zero outcome. There you go, Gareth. I haven't taken away the need for your product. I've increased the need for your product and the scope of it and the revenue management potential, but given you a more altruistic direction as well.
It's a shame it's not a video podcast, because my mobile number could have come up just at that moment.
Yeah, click here now. Sorry, how do people come to your company assuming that this would happen? How would we find your company?
If we only had some open data to work with that would enable us to...
That's absolutely right.
Well, I feel educated and learned. Johanna, has it swayed your view at all?
Well, you see, I don't know whether I've swayed or not, because actually I've never been a supporter of more of the as government policy has been for the last 13 years, I think, where more of the cost of rail has gone on to the fare paying passenger. And I think if we want to promote the right behaviours and get people out of cars and free up our towns and cities, give them more space, give them more green space, because this isn't just about the actual public transport itself. It's about the room that cars themselves take up, and regardless of whether you go to an electric car or not, they still take up the same amount of space. Mm-hmm. So we have to find a way of promoting that. But I think it's complicated, and I think universal basic mobility, as Hayden says, and we think of it holistically in terms of our mobility needs, and we can, get more people onto public transport, get more people onto shared mobility, more onto active, and we think of it in the round of investment in our infrastructure, then maybe we'll have a way forward. But so I'm a supporter, and I think it's worth thought, and we should promote some pilots.
Right. Okay. Down to work then. Hayden, thank you very much for your time today.
Much. Thanks for the opportunity, gents and ladies. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Great conversation.
Thank you, everyone.
And things to think about.
So thanks for listening to another episode of What Moves Us. We hope we moved you. For more episodes, you'll definitely want to subscribe to our channel.
Until next time.